Hey marketers, this is Dots and welcome to the Marketing Leadership Podcast. With me here is Flavilla Fongang, founder of GTA Black Women in Tech and Tech Brains Talk podcast. She is also the B2B influencer at Three Colors Rule. And we will be talking about having a solid B2B marketing strategy. I know you guys are ready, so let's get it. Flavilla, how are you doing? I'm really so happy with, all the great accomplishments. It seems like you're a train without brakes, which is good.
I can know that, yes, it's true. And, I have fun doing what I do, and that's super important. So, yeah, so I definitely enjoy, fun that I have. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Could you please tell us, a bit more about yourself, your background, your role, and some of the great stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, in a few words, I'm a founder of Three Colors Rule creative branding and marketing agency. Our expertise sits within inclusive marketing, inclusive branding, employee branding, and also, personal branding. So we build the brands of leaders or help marketers be more inclusive in the way they define their persona so they don't miss business opportunities. And also, one of the biggest issues for most employers is also diversity, talent attraction. So this is one of our skills and we're really good at it. Obviously, behind that was the birth of GTA Black Women in Tech, a non-profit organization focusing on supporting Black women, but also helping technology companies increase their talent attraction, of Black women. And we're doing really, really well. And yes, like you as well, on a podcast, which is a lot of fun, and having conversation with tech leaders. But I can talk about all the titles I have, but I'm going to need to free for today. So otherwise, this conversation is going to be longer than it's supposed to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. I would like to dive deep a bit about, what you do with Black women in tech. How have you seen that so far in terms of the momentum? Have you been seeing, very passionate entrepreneurs, for example, or professionals? And what are the most common fields in tech that you think, they have access to?
So yes, so one of the key things that is interesting, because when I started GTA Black Women in Tech, it was just very much part of our, DNI initiative for Three Colors Rule agency. Working in the technology sector, I quickly realized the lack of women representation, but also Black women more specifically. And I chose something that really represented me. And being a marketer that I am, I launched just as a selfish act of wanting to be around other Black women. And one thing led to another. I never thought that it would be so many companies with top 50, 100 interested now in working with us and aligning their brand with ours, which is amazing. But yes, so the group has been pretty phenomenal. We started in London, and through the blessing in disguise of COVID, we then out all the way to the UK, and then we opened our first chapter in Ireland, and we also opened in France this year. So we want to be the largest established network of Black women in Europe, and the next destination is Germany. But yes, so in the interest for diversity and diversity in the talent pool is there, and that's why we are highly demanded and doing really well. And I guess we do things very differently. What people don't know is behind this non-profit, there's a creative marketing agency who engine it. Therefore, we are doing things in a way that is creative, and we never spend a penny on advertising, which is beautiful because our audience has been such an advocate, which is always, this is what I try to explain to people. If you have a very engaged and loving audience that love what you do, you'll be more likely to recommend you, and it's what happened to us. And the rest is just beautiful history.
Beautiful history indeed. Now let's get into the topic, and again, talking about, having a solid B2B marketing strategy. I've met a lot of great marketers like yourself, and one of the greatest things or the most important points that they mention is having as much marketing strategy as possible within an initiative before execution. In fact, I know a specific individual who says 75% strategy and 25% execution. But in general, from a conceptual perspective, is that something you think you agree with? And if so, why?
I think the best way to think about it is that when you think about marketing, who do you see? Do you see money? Do you see companies? Or do you see people? And, I always tell people that by the time somebody decides to come to you, they've already done their research. When you want to buy something, you spend a bit of time doing our research. So funny because my partner will spend about 3 weeks researching on the product, where me, I just spend 20 minutes, I look, and I buy it. He's a different level of person. And everybody has their own time lap when it comes to making a purchase, which is super interesting. But I think it's part of being marketing is understanding the journey of your customer. This is where the strategy is important. So if somebody decides that they want to, to change the color of their hair, they probably have questions they're asking themselves, which is, if I change the color of my hair, how do I put to keep my hair hydrated? How much value, part of that strategy, how much value are you providing before people are even buying the product? And the value-based marketing approach is always a growing approach. So if you focus on value marketing instead of just product campaign, value campaign, then you're not going to get the same traction. But actually, and I love the thing was, I can't remember who said that, if you look at how social media was done really, really well, the people who are the growing audience focus 80% of their time on providing value and 20% of their time on selling. If you just sell, people don't pay attention. You focus on providing great value and using great examples of your work, integrated with your content, then the magic is there. So how well do you understand the journey of a CEO? How well do you understand the journey of a CMO at CEO? If you just send template content for everybody, but that's probably that's where things fail.
Yeah, interesting. And if you're listening now, you've listened to some of our other podcasts, you will realize the concept of the product market fit. And I think that's what Flavilla is, saying here with regards to what is the decision making process for your customer segment. Once you're able to figure that out, you also need to know what is the job to be done. Again, job to be done, a term, coined from Harvard, which is basically just a technical term for saying what are the customer needs, which is where, Flavilla brought out the example of, I change my hair, how do I keep it hydrated? Do you have value that addresses that job to be done? So this is how you see, again, no pun intended, where you need to connect the dots on some of these things. And I'm really grateful for that insight. Moving on here, what do you think a performance or a marketing strategy proposal, should have? Like, what are the most important ingredients, to give you context? If this ingredient is not in that strategy, then it's not a strategy. Or what are some of them? You can give us a top 5 or top 3.
So when you think about, I think a good marketing strategy is always about thinking, first of all, very logically, is really deciding what's the target you want to achieve. What are when you have that target, what are the metrics that you want to measure? Those key things, and then the time that you're giving yourself. If you're launching a new campaign, it's about brand awareness, or if you're launching a bad campaign, which is a customer acquisition, then the metrics are not the same. And because if you're trying to grow your social media audience, are you looking for customer engagement? Then again, metrics are very different. I think based on it, there's not so much of the one way. It really depends of what is the end goal, and then based on that, you will. And I always people think this is why also our company is called 3 Colors Rule. Is the magic of 3. I would say that everything should be done in 3 except the relationship. When you think about 3 inbounds, 3 outbounds, or 3 inbounds, whatever 3 inbounds that you can include in your marketing campaign, whatever 3 outbounds that you can include in your marketing campaign. So 3. So you should have 6 activities running to really just get you a 360 experience, a 360 reach for your target audience. In beyond marketing, and I think it's key to understand that is really utilizing the power of brand. And then I could spend up time building a business, and then they just start into marketing, but they don't actually understand the power of building a brand. It's very different. You can be a coffee shop, but if you are Starbucks, you're a brand. So Starbucks have no problem charging twice the price because people will buy from them. And that's just element of what brand gives you safety. That if you have too many choices to rake, then you go for that as a reference. So I would say that to really maximize your marketing activities, first is really reinforce the power and the credibility of your brand. And when you have that, your marketing budget will be maximized more effectively and will last longer. The biggest issue right now for most marketers is that budgets have decreased, and they have been asked to do as much or even more. So how are you utilizing not only your activities, but how can you also use technology out there to support you in your performance and your delivery? Hence why as well the blessing of knowing how to use artificial intelligence, but the right tool and so much more. So just to sum up basically, understanding what you're trying to measure and set your goals, set your deadlines effectively. When you have that, how can you, with a limited budget, amplify your activities by using the right technology and still really understanding how you can personalize it? Does it feel like someone is talking to a robot? And then back of that, your brand should be the overall element that makes it easy for your marketing to work. If you don't have that, then you're just wasting a lot of money.
Interesting. I think our listeners are probably used to some of the other bits, but many people, like you rightly said, do not consider branding. And I will reiterate again that branding is just so important. We had a brief discussion offline about, me trying to work on my brand and trying to set this brand that people should know or will relate with globally. And that's just how important it is, even if you don't think it's necessary because of the approach and because there are many other things involved. I think ultimately at the end of the day, brand always makes selling or makes marketing easier. So that's really, really, really great. We're about to get into a session where, I'm happy to have you dive into it as much as you would like. And you already started on that, which is about value. There are 3 areas of value when it comes to marketing. There may be different other semantics on this, but there is the concept of creating value, first of all, delivering value, and capturing value, especially in the B2B scene, but I also think it applies to B2C as well. When it comes to creating value, first of all, what do you think is the importance of a product market fit, in delivering a great value proposition? We actually started that, with the example of the AI and things like that. But from a conceptual perspective, could you share some of your wisdom, or all of your wisdom, actually? We don't want some of them, as to, what true creation of value means from a marketing strategy perspective.
What people know is that we don't know is that a non-profit organization every year produce a book called The Voices in the Shadow that tells the stories of Black women in tech across the UK and Ireland, and it's distributed to schools for free. And now this year we're going to distribute to libraries as well, so schools and libraries for this year. So I've committed myself for 10 years. So for the next 10 years, I'm going to produce a new book, new stories on Black women in tech. And I'm not short. I can literally, if I want to do 20 books, I can do it right now. So what's interesting is that, and if you look at this room, there's a story behind that. So the book itself could have been just a book, but we made it a full experience. So the theme of last year was addressing colorism and dark skin discrimination. My approach when it comes to very difficult topics, I want to always use in a positive and joyful manner, so I don't make people feel uncomfortable. Wherever your background is, it's very important. So what was a really important part of developing his brand value, of building that value for the book, was to tell a story, but also to take people on a journey so they can understand, what it means for Black women to be perceived in such a way because she has dark skin, or maybe she has, Afro hair and whatsoever. So as you can see in the room, there's different paintings and different prints of different Black women. And that's what we wanted to really, the message we wanted to communicate was, by darkening the skin of those Black women, you can still see their individuality, but also their beauty. And to wake people up to the reason why it's so important. And that's a great way as well to just approach and do that. Alongside that came a number of values such as, education on how companies can attract Black female talent, and also supporting Black women to find a journey to making entry into tech, because as we were very specific, and a lot of women, not Black women, who are not studying technology, had interest for, oh, now I'm never considered technology, but how can I do that? So creating those content to really help them, help as well raise the interest around the book. Because the book can only create based on the support of companies. And last year, for our activities and the amplification of our audience, we were able to really just go that in TikTok, Accenture, Google, and to name so many, Deutsche Bank and so forth, were among the brands who wanted to align their brand to our brand. I think this is why I keep talking about brand. If people don't see yourself as a brand that represents who they are, they're not going to buy from you. So really important to think in terms of how do you sit in their perception of value. If you are perceived as low value, then be it. This is one needle that works really well. If you are perceived as Hotel Chocolat, then be it. If you're perceived as goods, then people who are wealthy who buy goods whatsoever. So that value creation is not an option but a necessity that every marketers or whether they work with brands, specialists or strategic people, should be focusing on. Something, when we work, we work predominantly with CMOs. So what we do, we host this breakfast, we'll bring CMOs in the same company that have a conversation, they share insight, and at the same time, it's easy to sell, obviously high value ticket product when you build a relationship. So I would say to, part of the value creation is to understand what relationship do you have with your audience. Is it pretty much they get something and they never hear from you, or they keep coming back and also recommend you? If you have that, then you have a very great brand.
That's a very great perspective, to be honest. And I know before now you had already spoken about trying to meet the needs of clients, but also having to create that trust through branding is really what it is. Back in my early days of marketing, I read the book called Branding for Dummies. The popular Willie Publishing book series on any topic. And in that book, it says that branding is your promise as a company or a business to your customers. And at the end of the day, the success or failure of any brand is basically the success or failure of your promise to your existing and potential customers, or to the market, to put it in technical terms. So that's beautiful. Now, going on to delivering value. We have spoken about decision marketing funnel or decision making funnel, whether it's B2B or B2C. So I won't really spend so much time on that. But what are your thoughts when it comes to creating the right marketing content for each step of the decision making funnel of a particular audience segment? How do you typically approach, targeted content?
Yes, I think first thing is having the more clear you are by your niche, the easier your content will be relevant to your audience. I think that's super key. If you say my products for everyone, and people say to me, my products for everyone, I say, do you have Amazon's budget? So you don't have it. But your product is not for everyone. Yes, you're gonna have to be specific in terms of who you want to work with, which is super.
Even Amazon, this is specific.
Oh, exactly. So even Amazon has to be specific in terms of how we do it. But yes, so I think first thing is, the beauty is nowadays that you have a lot of great tools, but also how much, if you have an audience, how much can you tap into them? I think this is one thing that I always say to companies, not always to companies, that do not operate in silo where you magically put ideas out of your brain and say, oh, everyone gonna like it. Test it with your audience, like, hey, I'm planning to create this content. Is this a investment that you'll be interested in? Well, yes or no. Then say, like, what else would you be interested in? A lot of people don't think enough in terms of going back to their audience and asking them, what do you want? When you have that, then you can look into your content. Something like when you ask a question on Google, it will give you the most asked question depending on your market. Sometimes it doesn't mean that. But it's so important to just figure, something you go to a conference where you know that your audience is tend to be going, look at the topics that they cover. Okay, so these are the topics that are interested in my CMOs. That's why we all sign up to come and attend. And it's so key to really think that instead of just operating in a closed room with no lights and think that you're gonna have a magic moment,
Yeah, That's awesome. And I will say, not very long ago, I came across a post by Neil Patel, the great Neil Patel. And he said, every day we have Google's algorithm being tweaked, I think 9 times. So imagine the algorithm being tweaked 9 times a day. And the point he was trying to make is that it's hard to chase the algorithm. If that's kind of what you're trying to do. Oh, I want to be a great SEO person, for example. So I'm going to keep checking what Google is doing every day. He said that's impossible to do. But what's possible is asking your clients, asking your potential clients, what kind of content do you want that meets your needs? Like, I thought that was that was very insightful in a way. And now you reinforcing that, makes me feel a little bit more confident actually about the whole concept, because at the end of the day, it's people to people, it's humans to humans. And if you don't do what you can, as simple as, sending an email or even having phone calls, surveys with your clients or with your customers and try to find out what they want, what they need going forward, then you cannot really deliver the value. I mean, it's just as simple as that. And I really, really appreciate that perspective about that. The third stage, capturing value. When it comes to acquisition versus retention versus branding, I personally think right now everybody is so crazy about ROI. In the creator economy, for example, people look at a post that does 1 million views because it's got this kind of thumbnail and they just copy the same thing. So in the creator economy, there's an emerging problem of, plagiarism. Maybe that may not really happen with products, but in marketing, it's going to become a very, very big issue going forward. And then AI will probably complicate that. But I digress. When it comes to acquisition versus retention versus branding, how do you think marketers can strike the balance in terms of what to focus on the most? For example, should we, speaking to your word about silos, should we just focus on acquisition and just move on to the next thing? Or should we have a three-pronged approach to say, we are building a brand, we are acquiring customers, but we are also thinking about and working on keeping them? So what are your thoughts around that from your experience, and what do you think is the way to go?
So brand and customer retention are all intertwined. So it's one without the other does not work. So retention, what is really retention? Retention is, are you still relevant to your audience? Are you still doing stuff that you have a great customer service and you're providing what they're after? And this sits within retention. It's not just a marketing campaign, it's also how innovative you are. You think about the most leading brands out there, they spend their time on innovation. So I will ask people, if you want to retain your customer, what have you done recently different lately? It's like, oh, okay then. So how are you going to retain them if you just take them for granted? It's like I always people take a relationship. If you're in a marriage for 10 years and you never take your wife, on holiday, you never do something such a surprise, at some point, somebody's going to cheat.
I was going to say that.
Someone's going to go on divorce if you don't make an effort to once in a while do something some your customers don't expect. This is what I also call, this is another model that I've developed, which is called beyond marketing. What are the things people expect from you, and how can you go beyond? That always surprising them. If you have a mindset of it, if you have a brand with innovation as part of your DNA, you will know the importance of innovating to maintain customer retention. Again, I would say retention doesn't matter if you're a startup. What you should be focusing on, it doesn't matter. But I'm saying that your bigger focus will be more on acquisition, because you don't have enough clients. When you have those clients, have a great customer service so you can keep them for look. When you're a bigger company where you have new key players who comes in, you are one of the largest insurance companies, and a small business comes in and having new method of things, what's your customer retention? So if you think about new bank, new investment, all these things in the fintech space, they have disturbed the financial sector completely. And that's so important to really understand they force the traditional banks to innovate because they were very happy for you make a transfer, it takes 3 days to come, well, Monzo, boom, in an hour you have it, and like, wow, so we need to, to increase our base. So client retention, client acquisition is important. It all depends where you are right now. If you say, okay, we're in our business to grow, then client acquisition is important. And client retention should be a necessity again. Like brand and client retention is a necessity and not an option. And this is how people wonder why the customers don't buy from them again. And we were having this conversation this morning on breakfast, about this brand that everybody loved, but the customer service was so poor. Not going to buy from them again. The delivery was for so long. Why would you buy from them again? And you can lose a customer that you spend so much money acquired because you don't have a great onboarding system in place. This is where, the partner should not operate in silo. If I do my job and bring the customers, how are you looking at after them very well? That's super key.
Interesting. It reminds me of a saying where someone said, the most important KPI in marketing 360 is engagement. Whether you are acquiring or retaining or building a brand, engagement is the main thing. And I like what you said about, having that marriage between branding and retention, because it takes retention activities or initiatives to build a brand. And I also remembered in one of your posts, you had mentioned that when launching a product, especially for not just the big companies, but even small businesses, don't just launch the product when you go to market and just say, oh, hey, hi, here's the product. Always have the community waiting for that product to come. I think you mentioned something about having an email list. So when you have something coming, have an email list, take people behind the scenes as the product is almost ready. And then when it's time to launch, then you have a waiting community to receive that product. I find that really interesting when it comes to branding and acquisition. And would you maybe give some more thoughts around that?
Yes, so for example, after the success of DTA Black Women in Tech, which is very much about just Black women in tech, I decided that I wanted to launch a network that focuses on the accomplished and successful Black professionals and entrepreneurs around the world. So the new venture is called Black Rise. So say I'm not going to spend money building a new platform until I know that it's definitely working. So my point of it, and this is what I say, even I remember I was giving a talk at Oxford University, and I say that, you should not spend that much time building a product on your own, not knowing if someone's going to buy it. Involve your customers through a journey and really capture data, information based on what you share with them. What are the expectations? What do we expect to be able to get from you? And so much more, which is super, super, super key. And that's important, It's not about just taking them on a journey, but it's also about showing them this is what we like to be. Are you more interested in those features? Are you more interested in those features? Launch your MVP, tested with a very small number of strong founding members. I wouldn't say founding members, but people who are very, interested in your product and will give you feedback. Then when you have that against something, the less you make your product accessible, the more you create desire. If you think about Clubhouse, when Clubhouse launched, you need to know somebody was in it to be able to get in it. And obviously the lost momentum because people have come out of COVID and want you to meet people instead of being on audio. We still have an audience. But yes, so it's important to do that. So yes, the waiting list is such a thing that I see a lot of startups skip, which is a shame because they're just in this rush. There's always this rush of fast. Yeah. And then, go fast, but also fail fast. Or you go slightly slower and get enough time to really build momentum very, very well and excitement.
Yeah, absolutely. That's wonderful. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, now you see a reason why. This is great information. This is great wisdom that money cannot buy. Just to put it direct to you guys. So if you haven't subscribed, I am on Amazon, and I'm on Spotify, and I'm on the Apple Podcast. You can also subscribe on YouTube as well. Just on any of your podcast players where you feel comfortable, you can find me there at Marketing Leadership Podcast. Flavilla, if you don't see it, create it. Does that quote sound familiar? I saw that, at one of your speeches where you received an award. I know you received so many of them, and in one of those speeches, I hear you said that quote. When you said that, what struck to me is the new frontier of podcast marketing in general. I know we've always had podcasts, but not until the last few years, 3-4 years, I don't think people have really thought about, propagating podcast content or distributing it or promoting it. So in general, what do you think about, B2B podcast marketing? When it comes to like the organic optimization, for example, and paid media optimization or boosting? Or what are your experiences with that? What have you seen people doing? And so
I must say, when it comes to that, I have no idea. I'm just the one who do podcast. Well, the thing that I would say when it comes to podcast, promoting doesn't suggest that if you just post your podcast and don't do the promotion, then you're probably missing out. But I love B2B podcasts and I listen to them a lot. And, the truth, I love to listen, which are great. But people forget that you can also advertise within, different platforms that allows this. But it has to be a bit further than that. But I wouldn't say details because I'm actually dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, basically, it's just like every other content, right? You cannot just write an article and say, oh, because you're writing an article, it's going to sell itself. You have to share on social media. You have to optimize it for keywords. You have to maybe put some paid promotion if needed. You have to share that with your community, owned channels, basically. So I get what you're trying to say there in the sense of content will not run by itself. People talk about virality and not, but the truth is that most of the content that are viral are made by people who did not expect it to go viral. They just want to share great content, and they must have promoted or shared or propagated it in some way, and then later it becomes viral because of the value of the content itself. So if you're listening here, it's not just about the value of the podcast, for example, but also making sure as much as possible you share that podcast with your community. You put some budget behind it if you need to. You optimize it for SEO within the podcast platforms and so on and so forth. My goal personally, if you are listening, make sure you follow me on LinkedIn, is to see a better podcast marketing world. And I've been doing a lot of work with many partners across the world on how podcasts, being the new content oil, if we will term it that way, is something that marketers should be paying attention to with regards to, okay, do we have the right statistics to improve podcast content? Do we have the right channels to deliver validated listens in terms of paid or even the organic search ecosystem of Spotify, for example? How can people rank their podcast higher on those platforms? Those are kind of some of the things that I have been looking at, and I will continue to speak to marketing leaders like Flavilla on their thoughts on this emerging industry. There's still a lot to be accomplished right now, and there's a lot going on. I think everything else is overshadowed by AI, but I also think that the world of podcast marketing is going at a fast rate, and it's really coming up. YouTube recently released their YouTube podcast feature. That is some way of podcast marketing. They have seen some potentials in that as well. With that said, I often hear of the term one-click stand. And, if you are old enough, you know what the equivalent of that is. And why this is important is because it is a problem for marketers. They want to just run the campaigns and move on. They don't want to see it through in the sense of is this campaign building the brand? Is this campaign delivering commercial value? So if you're looking at, marketers who really want to deliver sustainable growth, what are your ideas in terms of the right mindset, for example, in using marketing tactics to deliver true growth? What are the attitudes that marketers need to change when it comes to not working in silos? If you can also maybe laser focus on that silos concept. I really like it. I find that interesting. What are some of your thoughts, in as to we marketers doing right when it comes to running campaigns, writing strategies, and growing businesses for you?
So there's no, I don't think there's one answer because it obviously really depends of every of every business. But I think what's important is again something I start with brand because it's really key and people really don't understand the importance of having a strong brand. When you have that brand, it makes all your marketing efforts so much easier. And I think we're in the era of technology. I mean, we've been in the era of technology for a very long time. There's a lot of great tools out there that can help people do their work more effectively. Anything that as a great marketer, you should be go to events, marketing events, and learn about new things that you can improve, like tools that are created by great companies out there to help you understand your data, deliver your content more effectively. We're spending hours doing some editing on your content. This, AI is really the word on everyone's mouth. If it use the right way of the right element, it will never replace someone's creativity. It's just an amplifier helper for performance delivery. That's what it is. But I would say that if you want to step up your game, if you're like a one-man band for a company, technology is there to help you and do that well is the key.
Yeah, makes sense. And I would like to stay on the topic of, tools and tactics and stuff like that. When it comes to brand strategy in itself or brand research, what are some of the cost-effective ways you think, marketers can research about their brand, about their market, and about their competitors? A very good example is the mind map, right? You got a cross, and then you have 4 quadrants where you place logos of brands and competitors. Very basic, but I personally still use it today. So what are some of the other tools like that? And maybe if you know of softwares like, say, SimilarWeb that does competitive intelligence, from a technical perspective, what are some of the tools that can help us in conducting a very solid brand strategy research?
There's so many good ones. First one is obviously Google Analytics. You have SEMrush, which is also really well. You have, something that's come on my mind. Again, something, I'm not directly doing all this research, so my team will probably know better than I do. But yes, so do you understand your industry? And I think that you shouldn't even start any marketing without understanding who your customers are. I think that's super, super, super key. And so all your competitors are, that's super key. Identify them, is to search, and again, something from your sales team. If they say no, and they say I'm working with somebody else, you need to know who they are. All the information doesn't need to be collected just by marketers. And this is why it's so important for sales and marketing to work together, where you can find information in terms of what customer is saying and what, the reason why the customer is saying, the prospect is saying no. That's the key. But yes, so when it comes to brand, these other tools are a bit more complex depending on depending on the size of the business, because it can be quite pricey if you don't have that budget. The starting point, your website should have the right tools, integration to be able to monitor. You have heat map, which are there as well for you to help you to figure out what going to your website, what people are really searching. I mean, so it's such a great, great avenue for different budget. But I would say start first by really understanding your market, your competitors. When you have that, look back into your own data, conduct, online and offline reviews, and ask for information. You'd be surprised how much people are willing to tell you, and then from that, keep on building it. It doesn't have to be super complicated, but
yeah, I think, if you're listening here, that is the right way to go. Working on your data, working with sales, which many people don't want to do, but you have to do it if you really want to grow a company under a shared brand vision, right? So it's important for you to be able to find out more from, resources around you, and, no one will be hesitant to do that. Really, looking at your internal data, looking at, performance of your product, working with other departments, including service as well, because they will also play a big part in retention. And the reason is just because tools these days are very expensive. Like talk work, if you are working with like a talk worker, for example, that does brand mentions, very expensive. On the PR side, there's cover book, extremely expensive, and so on and so forth. There are just these many tools that unfortunately are so expensive that the barrier to entry is very high. But not to say, there are not cheaper tools out there, but start with the concept, first of all. Start with the basic stuff around competitor analysis, SWOT analysis, decision-making processes. Work on your 4 or 5 Ps, of marketing, and try to get as much information in your environment around that, so that there is that organic spread, and you can really grow and retain the way you would like. Let's sticking on the technical side of things. Have you had experiences where you see marketers not reporting campaigns the way they should? And here's what I'm saying. People a lot of times focus on the wrong KPIs because these KPIs are very convenient. Then the second thing is that when it's time to report those KPIs, they report it in a way that doesn't give the right visibility to leadership. So what's your advice to marketers who need to summon courage, basically, and do marketing right? Even if there are challenges, which I've mentioned before earlier in this episode, to say, oh, there are challenges, but this is the plan to move things forward, and you can communicate that with leadership as much as possible. A lot of people are scared of marketing budgets. Are they going to cut my budget because I'm reporting this bad KPI? But I also think there is a process of making leadership understand the projection of your brand campaigns or your brand strategy, and giving as much transparent insights as possible. So what's your advice to marketers listening here that need to really report on their campaigns in a transparent and valuable manner?
Okay, so let's put it this way. Like, for example, if I said to you, like, okay, I'm going to finish this podcast and I'm going to be home for dinner, and I'm saying that to you. What is missing in this? And you and my husband, and said to you, I'm finishing my podcast and I'm going to be home for dinner. What is your next vote? What time?
It's gonna what time? Because I was gonna say that it's early, right? So it's depending on the time zone. Yeah,
absolutely. You want to be able to manage people's expectation, which is super key. That's what it is. I think it's sometimes people get it wrong. Says you look at the KPIs and see it as it's fair too soon. It's like if you engage a salesperson, give them at least 3 to 6 months able to see some traction, and you have to be comfortable with the fact that they're not going to bring business on the first month. Some of them are brilliant, but most of them might not be able to bring business on the first month. What exactly are you looking at? I think it's super key. So I think it's the best way to manage your expectation from the leaders is to give them good timeline in terms of this is what it's going to look like for the first 3 months. It's not relevant. We should really evaluate a little bit later, and so they don't have to worry about it and so forth. So something like to pay attention to the wrong KPIs, such as vanity KPIs, the number of likes, doesn't pay the bills really. So it's more in terms of the number of engagement and so much more.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think I've seen somebody say it in this way. Time. Use time as a means to manage expectations, because time allows you to perform as many tests as possible to try to drive progress and get to your desired goal. It's been awesome with you, Flavilla. I really, really am very, very happy and delighted with all the things, the great things that you have shared. And you did not disappoint, is what I'm trying to say here. So where can our marketers find you if they need help with growing their tech startups or scale-ups and trying to establish great brands?
Very easy. They can Google our company, Free Colors Wool, or search for my name, and easy to be found. There's only one Flavilla. So yes, you can find me. I spend a lot of time. I'm very active on LinkedIn. It's my favorite platform for business. Yes, so it's a good place to get started. And yes, and figure out. And What is great as well, I've just released my marketing course, my branded marketing course on LinkedIn. Book and do a service course. It's only 30 minutes. So it's very quick. We'll get to learn the A to Z to really successfully launching a brand and also growing it.
Absolutely. Please, again, get that course on LinkedIn Learning. It's just the price of your coffee cup, like they usually say, right? Get that course if you try to get started or even try to improve your existing knowledge in creating great branding strategies. That's all for today. Thanks for listening. See more episodes at dotslovesmarketing.com and subscribe to the Marketing Leadership Podcast on Apple and Spotify. Till next episodes, connect the dots.
Thank you for listening to the Marketing Leadership Podcast, brought to you by Dots Loves Marketing. There will be links to any resources mentioned in today's show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode.